Hey everybody, I'm Alexis. This is my husband Garrett. So today we're continuing the series about how the types can be annoying, and today we're doing the INTP. So just a quick note about this series: it's mostly just a provocative, tongue-in-cheek title, but so it's not just to like roast the types. Even though I happen to love roast videos, but this video is mostly just how the types can grow through kind of the lens of a provocative title. So we're not just like, oh, you're so annoying. And it's also not that, it's not that all INTPs do all of these things. It's just that I notice some unhealthy INTPs doing some of these things. So make sure I got my TI disclaimers. This depends. This depends on, that's the hack an INTP gave me. You just say it depends, and then you're good.
Then you're good.
Yeah, it depends on, whatever you think it depends on. It just depends.
In most cases, not all.
Sometimes it doesn't depend. Yeah, it doesn't always depend. Okay, yeah. So I want to start off by talking about what I like about INTPs. I think that they are so open-minded. Of the healthy INTPs I know, that is my favorite thing, is how open-minded they are. I think you get some of that NE, you get this intellectual, open-minded, like, quirkiness that is a really fun combination. Something that I personally appreciate a lot, that I don't see from all the types, but I've never met an INTP that I found to say anything sexist, which I feel like that's kind of a rarity, but none of the INTPs I know have said anything sexist, which I very much appreciate. I just feel like they're so open-minded that way, very careful with their language. Not in a way where they're like tipping around, or it's not like that. It's just that they say what they mean and they mean what they say, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And mostly just the open-mindedness. I've had some really enlightening conversations because I feel like that NE extends the knowledge really broadly. And so they have something to say on a lot of different topics. And so conversations can be so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're phenomenal conversationalists. I think they're super fun to be around. Their quirkiness, I think especially healthy INTPs are like quirky, and they're very fun to be around. Yeah.
I love the random, like, you get, depending on how much NE they have, you'll get, like, them wearing some, like, fun, like, anime shirts sometimes. I don't notice that from all INTPs, but the more NE that they're exhibiting, you get some of this, like, anime shirts. Or we just saw one at the library. She had this necklace of all these, like, Disney pins.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there can be some, like, fun, quirky style, which is a big differentiator between, like, INTPs and ISTPs, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, which brings us to mistypes. So we just need to rail on the most common mistype, which is ISTP thinking they're INTPs. Or, again, this is tongue-in-cheek. Not always, but if you're working in welding, in auto mechanics, anything with your hands, you're probably an ISTP, not an INTP.
Yeah, I did this in my INTJ video, but I took the list of all the ISTPs I know, and I read off the jobs that they have, and it was like firefighter, welder, mechanical engineer, designs hydraulic systems. So some of those I feel like for a beginner you could make an argument like, oh, that's kind of an N thing to design hydraulic systems. I must be an N. I'm designing hydraulic systems. I'm an engineer. But those are really more, I think you get some of that NI third, SE second is what those are. And then I read off the jobs for the INTPs that I happen to know, and it was like working in IT, one works at SpaceX, a video editor. They happen to be a lot of technology jobs. Oh, one's a physicist.
It's like a lot of working with ideas instead of working with hands. Again, not always, but
some of the IT can be working with hands, I would say. I mean your hand. Literally everyone's gonna work with their hands. But when you say work with your hands, you mean
like your hands are getting
work.
Dirty doing something.
Yeah, dirty.
Or
yeah.
Your mind is getting dirty going into all of the options.
I'm just kidding.
That didn't sound quite right.
It was so funny. So yeah, those are kind of stereotypical jobs that I just said, but those are just the ISTPs and the INTPs that I know. So it's not that they always have jobs like that, but if you have a clustering of stereotypes, they're stereotypes for a reason. The reason that those hands-on, like firefighter, those type jobs, they lend themselves really well to TISE. And even like then the mechanical engineer and designing hydraulic systems, that lends itself to a little bit of that NI. It's, the design of the sensory thing.
Yeah.
And then, the SpaceX, I feel like that really lends itself to NE and TI when you get into, physicists, things like that. It's so funny. I was listening to you have a conversation about religion with an INTP, and it's so funny because you two have each other's like very last function. So he's an ISFP, and listening to them talk about religion was hilarious because Garrett was coming at it from the lens of like, I just feel this spiritual connection to God, and the INTP's like, yeah, but how can we know?
Yeah,
And it
it's
was
like-
from a much more like scientific perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned this, I think, in the ENTP video, but it's like we're on complete different wavelengths. Like the TI and FI and the NE and SE, what we both have, and it's like not understanding or comprehending each other.
I felt like I
I-
was translating the whole time because I
Yeah.
can kind of speak in both of the languages, I feel. Like being an NT, I can speak the one, and then having the same functions as him, I can be in that one. I felt like I was translating the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, a bunch of tangents, but point is, if part of this video doesn't resonate, check out especially ISTP, or a lot of times the test is one letter off, so maybe check out INTJ is another one, ENTP, or probably not INFP, but yeah, so.
Well, sometimes I do see that actually. Sometimes, yeah. So on my previous INTP video, I made a brief comment, this like tongue-cheek comment that was like, if I was stuck on an island, I'd want to be stuck with an INTP because they're great conversationalists. And then I was like, oh well, actually maybe not, because if it was just me and them, I don't think we could survive. I don't know that we do very well. All sorts of INTPs come in the comments and they're like, I would be the best. You don't even know. I'd be the best. Because I'm actually a survivalist for like a living. I'm a homesteader and my job's a welder, and they go on about all this stuff. And I'm like,
ISTP.
you're an ISTP. Well, I mean, maybe not. I mean, that's not enough information to say. But ISTPs would be my first pick. Okay, for survival. Like if I need to survive with someone, like ISTP first pick, INTP last pick. So it's a big differentiator. And the big differentiator is that SE polar versus NE polar. It's very different. Whereas the INTP, yeah, they might read survival books. They might have gone on Wikipedia and they might have, have learned all this stuff. But I just feel like an ISTP would just pick it up faster.
Yeah. I don't know if it's worth mentioning the Reddit stereotype too.
Oh, the Reddit
I was
stereotype.
like, Reddits are like invented by INTPs and
Yes.
like.
There's like a stereotype of Redditors, you know what I mean? They're just like these single people in their mom's basement on Reddit. Not that all INTPs, not that, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Not all INTPs, that's not that all INTPs are single in their mom's basement. But I do think, maybe I'm digging myself in a hole. I revoke my comment.
Maybe 30% max. So we won't even say most on that one.
It depends. Is it my get out of jail free card? It depends. I don't think it works.
Moving along, the functions.
Good lord. Okay, yeah. Okay, so right up on the screen, the functions of the INTP.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, that's you. So yeah, their first function is introverted thinking. So the word introvert means to turn inward. So turning inward to your thoughts. So turning inward to your thoughts, your logic, and it's how your thoughts are distinct from the group's thoughts. So it's making a lot of distinctions. It's an introverted function, so it's going inward and processing, so it can make thoughts very precise, very distinct. It can make them contrarian, but I find the INTPs do that in a pretty well-rounded way, that it doesn't tend to be off-putting in my experience. But yeah, super technical, methodical, very precise. Their second cognitive function is extroverted intuition. So extrovert means to turn outward. And then intuition is kind of the opposite of sensing. So sensing is like the things that you've experienced, and intuition would be things like maybe you have not experienced. That could be a new idea that you want to bring to life externally. I would say that's the most common thing that I've seen with extroverted intuition is taking an idea and bringing it to life externally. So that's where you get a lot of the inventiveness from INTPs. And, I think that a lot of their interest in technology, that stereotype comes from TI and NE coming together, kind of this always on the brink of the new technology and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's very optimistic and bubbly, and it sees possibilities, because possibilities are things that you've not experienced, but it's like in your mind, it's a possibility. So that's where you can get the topic of like brainstorming and things like that. Their third cognitive function is introverted sensing. So it's to turn inward to things that you've experienced, things that you've sensed. And so an inward processing of things that you've experienced. So that could be processing a memory. That could be reliving a story or hearing a story. And the higher this is up in someone's stack, the more they enjoy doing it. So that reliving a memory and processing it and finding the meaning within it and learning from your experiences and how it's like your life is this all these chapters and it's built to who you are now, and it's really loving that. So sometimes the higher this is up in someone's stack, they can be kind of optimistic toward the past because you can find so much meaning in there, whereas the future might be kind of uncertain, but the past has all this meaning. Now in the case of the INTP, it's third, so I do think that they enjoy that inventiveness in the new more than the past, but it still is an important part of them. And their fourth cognitive function is extroverted feeling. So it's turning outward to the feelings kind of the group. This could be feelings, this could be emotions, this could be group norms, like how do we all feel about talking about politics? Is it appropriate or is it not? So yeah, and I think this can be kind of a sore spot for INTPs. I think they can feel kind of like awkward since it's their fourth function. I do think that they feel more awkward than they actually come off, but I do hear that a lot from INTPs, that they feel awkward. Okay, so yeah, one thing to note is that, like, going back to the ISTP mistype, those first and fourth functions are the same in the ISTP, so I found that they relate a lot to that, but their second and third functions are very different. So one thing that I noticed that's kind of a major difference in ISTPs and INTPs is that INTPs are a lot more communicative, because that extroverted intuition function is pretty good with communication in my experience. ISTPs are a little bit more the strong silent type, I've found. You can get them, especially if they're in like kind of a really extra, like a sensory setting. Like occasionally I get an ISTP, maybe they're lighting off fireworks, or I find the ISTPs can be into kind of pyrotechnic type stuff. If you get them in that setting, they can be kind of chatty, but for the most part, I find that ISTPs are more the strong silent type, and INTPs can be a lot more of that quirky, chatty professor vibe. Mm-hmm. Not always, but yeah. Okay, so let's get into how we find the types annoying, or the INTP annoying. Let's start with introverted thinking. What do you got, Garrett?
And quick reminder, the goal of this is just to highlight growth paths. We're talking about, like, man, we have to roast the INTPs. They're such cuties. We don't want to roast them.
Cuties? Wow, what a thing to say.
I call a lot of types cuties, though, so...
Yeah, well, ISFP. Yeah, the ISFP calling types cuties. Yeah, that's calling the kettle black, isn't it?
But yeah, as we're going through these functions, these are just growth paths for you, and some of these might not resonate. A lot of these are going to be on the unhealthier side of the spectrum, and probably not all of these are going to resonate. But yeah.
There's one INTP that commented. They were like, "I can't wait for the INTP video. Don't go easy on us," which I appreciate. I appreciate that spirit toward things.
Yeah. I think this is a type that will take criticism very well. That's what we love about TI Doms. Mm-hmm. They take criticism phenomenal. But okay.
Not that we have that much, but yeah.
All right. First thing I put for TI, too precise, trees over forest. So I think there can be TI in unhealthy forms can go over minor details instead of looking at the big picture, and it can get like nitpicky, I guess. Small example, like saying something like, last April we went hiking, and then correcting like, oh, actually it was last May. There's like a little thing in the sentence that you swap, and that's a small example, but.
Right, and I think some of that is FE issues, because like the point of the sentence was to be like, hey, we had this fun experience together. Remember that fun experience? And it was meant to, the intent, like the point of the sentence was to be like a bonding thing, but instead it gets truncated by this, no, you got the month wrong. And so what was like a a bonding experience becomes like a, you're wrong. Yeah, I think, and I noticed that more with INTPs that are heavily in SI, because NE is kind of the definition of big picture, but SI is incredibly like detail. TI and SI are both incredibly specific detailed functions, I found.
Yeah.
And so you get that more when they don't have enough NE.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say you can get kind of this know-it-all vibe. It's not that often, and I find INTPs to be pretty open-minded, but it is sometimes, I've actually had one say to me, like, I said something and they're like, well, yeah, obviously. And that kind of like, yeah, obviously. It's like, it's very demeaning. It's like, duh, is kind of like, I don't know how to even describe it.
Yeah, and we've
mentioned, why did I even speak?
We've mentioned this, especially in like TI in that second spot, but I think younger INTPs or unhealthier INTPs can have that like arrogance, know-it-all-ishness.
Mm-hmm. And it comes up different from like ISTPs. SE is more like, it has kind of like a power to it, like a physical power or something like that. So it seems a little different. With INTPs, it's more this professor, like, yeah, obviously. Push up the glass, that's what that was. One thing that now this is me being a TE user, so I don't think everyone is going to have the same criticism that I have. But they explain things for my pacing so slowly. I'm like, what it feels like, TI is like, okay, here's this, and then this, and it's like a deductive reasoning. so that we get to the punchline. Now, a lot of times the punchline is something incredibly obvious to me. It's something like 2 plus 2 is 4. And I'm like, okay, you could have just had what you would just start with the punchline. 2 plus 2 is 4. See if I agree or disagree. If I agree, let's just move on. Let's skip the deductive reasoning. But instead it's like 2 is a number. It's an even number. 1 plus 1 is 2. Yeah. 2 plus 2, and then you get this whole thing, and you get to this like really basic truth at the end of it. And you're like, okay, we just spent 20 minutes with something I already agreed with. Maybe we could have just skipped the punchline. Do I agree or disagree? If I disagree, then you can take me through the deductive thing.
Yeah, it's like the process becomes so important that every step you're highlighting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can't think of an example, but it's typically stuff that I just agree with already.
Yeah. One thing, I think it'll come up a few times, but I've noticed INTPs can feel, it's like a social uneasiness. I think with that low FE, because all of these are on an axis, TI and FE. If you haven't developed FE enough, I think there can be this social unease, like they're unsure if they're fitting in the world around them. They're nervous about how they show up and come off in the world, and so I've noticed they can be sort of timid, I guess, or a lot of like qualifiers in things they say or things they do. Whereas I think healthy INTPs are really good at, they just show up as they are and they're confident in what they're saying and what they're doing. I think unhealthy INTPs can be really nervous and timid.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, kind of this lack of confidence, which makes me feel kind of sad, actually, for them, because I think that they have like really good ideas and thoughts, but yeah, there is kind of a timidness with some of them.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of that before. One thing I was going to say is they'll pick the most intricate system, not the most usable system. So, for example, like at church, so you're like in charge of this tech team, and there's a classic. They use tons of INTPs on this tech team. It's actually kind of fun.
Always on slides.
So you get this, so he's like in charge of this tech team, and one of the guys, he's like, okay, so there's this update, and then it's going to do this, and if we do this and we connect all these things, da-da-da-da. And anyway, so it's this very complicated system. Now, it probably is the best system, but it like, all these complicated things make it like 0.01% better, but they make it like 45% more difficult, like 45 times more difficult to explain to new people and train people on this new system. And so it's like TE's like, okay, I think TE would make some adjustments. It's like, okay, it's not the best system, but it's more usable and we'll get more volunteers and we can keep this thing running more. We're not going to have all these like computer experts on the team. So we need to like tailor it to these people.
Yeah, I've noticed a few times INTP leads or leaders can make things so precise that they understand it super well, because I think INTPs, I mean, especially we're talking about like technology, like on the computer, sort of, software working, and they can do those really well and create this complex system that maybe works really well for them. But then, especially as a team lead or as a trainer or a leader, you have to duplicate these things to other people, which I think is what TE does good. It like makes things simple, you get it done, you can transfer it on to someone else. And so then there's this part lacking of transference ability, gets lost when there's so many details. You can basically only train other INTPs on.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trained a couple times by INTPs, and I actually find it really hard to follow their instructions sometimes, because like the way that I want to know is like if someone's explaining a game to me, I'd want to know the point of the game is this. Like, the point of the game is to get the most points. The way you get points is this. The game's done when we run out of this, and then you get into the process. Whereas I feel like the way INTPs explain things is they start in this whole process, and they start explaining these, like, minute rules, and I'm like, wait. I still don't understand what the point of the game is yet. Okay, I don't need to know, like, all these random, like, rules yet.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so I've been trained by INTPs on some tech things, and it can be hard to follow. Same way with ISTPs, like, we mentioned vocabulary can be hard to follow, and with ISTPs, it was a lot more, like, in my experience, it's been like car parts or like engineering terms, like rotor and pistons and all this stuff. And I don't know what these things are. With INTPs, it's a lot more of these computer terms that I think are basic to them. Like they'll just RAM and CPU, and I don't know any of these computer terms. And they just start saying all these terms that I'm like, I'm just trying to train on this thing. I don't think I need to know about all this other stuff.
Yeah, and we've touched on this detail-oriented loop with TI and SI. I think that's why, and a big part is because you're so looped in the details. I think healthier INTPs can be great leaders. I think they can get into their NE, which is a little bit bigger picture. It's focused on not just like all these details, but also the broader purpose of a thing, or the broader spectrum of how to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the final thing I was going to say is you can get this monologuing with INTPs. If you get them talking on something that they are super interested about, something that maybe they were on Wikipedia learning about for 2 hours last night, then they want to like tell you about it. You can get this monologue partly because they want to explain every little detail so precisely, and then I think T and SE are some functions that explain things quick, and they don't have those, and so SI is kind of slow, TI is kind of slow, NE is kind of fast, but if they're not in that,
NE sort of rambles.
Yeah, NE rambles. Yeah, so there's all these reasons why they can explain things. So it takes a long time, and so then sometimes I feel like I just exist here to be their student. They just want to monologue and all their learnings to me.
Which is funny because you see a lot of INTP professors, I think, and I think that's probably
I had a bunch of INTP. Yes,
it's a great role for them to get their musings and ramblings out.
Yes, the type of professor that rambles. Yes, they're exactly that type of professor. Yeah.
It is a pretty good job. You get some extroversion in. You get your NE, you get your FE. You're relating to a class, so you're not just stuck in this loop. You actually get a. That's about it.
Yeah, I had an INTP math professor. He would ramble. It was funny. Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Introverted thinking.
Good
Okay.
for TI.
Moving on to extroverted intuition. What do you got?
I put a sort of a complete lack of bodily awareness. I think with that. SI lower and maybe like SE polar, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
They can have a hard time. It seems like it's like sort of awkward movements, awkward with their body, but also just I think taking care of their body, like things like showering, or we've noticed this with INTJs. I think I gave you a little hard time about it too, but like showering, putting on like clean clothes, or there's just like stuff that's a lot of people find, especially dominant SI users, get ready really good for the day, always have their routines like drinking water, having snacks. I think INTPs can oversight some of these things, and then the reason that's annoying is with FE, it's sort of I guess shortcutting your FE, where people I think connect with people better if they're well presented. And if they're put together in their dress and in their cleanliness. And so I think that can take away some of the FE, being able to relate to other people and to connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said this in the INTJ video as well, but I've been listening to some lawyers, and they talked about this study that was done where the more attractive a witness was on the stand, the more likely jurors were to view that witness as credible. And so I think that's something that's kind of repulsive to INTs. They're like, why would looks have anything to do with credibility? Because they don't. But
yeah,
to some extent, you have to like play the game. I think that's the thing that FE does really well. If you look at some like ENFJs or whatever, they might not have done so much TI research and things like that, but they can move a room and influence a room. And I think that's something that INTPs and like INTJs and different types wish that they could do a little bit better. And I think attractiveness, I mean like basic things. I mean like showering, like hygiene, like basic stuff. So which I don't want to say that all INTPs have. I know plenty of INTPs that do not have bad hygiene issues, but it really actually affects your credibility. And I think you'll find that you'll be taken more persuasively. I think it's hard for when people like with TE users, for example, they see someone spouting off this idea, and they, I'm thinking of one INTP in my head when I'm thinking this. They live in their mom's basement. They never shower. They just seem super grumpy on the computer all the time, just like wasting their life away pretty much. They may have some really good ideas in there, but it's hard to see that as credible when it's like, you have all these ideas, and the byproduct of those ideas has been this kind of crappy life. So if I take on your ideas, I don't know that there are going to be results. Like, I don't want those results. So I'm not going to take on your process if I don't like your results. And I think process versus results is something that TI and TE kind of differ on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm kind of like, I don't trust your process unless I like your results. That's something.
Yeah, it's like when you think of advertisements, they always use attractive people for selling something. So as an INTP, I think you have phenomenal ideas, phenomenal insights into the world around you. If you want to get more impact in your world through FE and NE, part of that is going to be looking nice, presenting well, getting some stuff in your life in order, which does take some SI discipline and like just healthy habits. So
What is the what's the founder of Facebook's name?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg. He I don't know if he's an INTP, but you know how he dresses the same way every day? I think that's fine for an INTP. Like if you want to dress like that, that's completely fine. No problem with that. Yeah. It's more these, like Einstein hair. Sometimes with unhealthy INTPs, I can think of one in particular. This one that I knew, he had like super crazy like hair, didn't shower, always had these like wrinkled like shirts and like weird stuff. But so you don't have to do anything crazy. Like just think of what Mark Zuckerberg wears. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say is they can come off actually kind of close-minded, and I don't actually think that they are legitimately close-minded, but they come off close-minded. So if I am learning something new with an INTP, so like they're learning something new and I'm learning something new for the first time together, you really see that open-mindedness. You see that NE coming out, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. Like if I'm learning something new with them, you see that open-mindedness. Now, on the other hand, if there's something that I want to, like I have this perspective on, and they have already learned a perspective on that's different, they can come off very close-minded, and you get that TI in the SI, and SI is very stubborn, like, nope, I already did my research, this is what it is, da-da-da, and they can come off kind of close-minded. Yeah. So close-minded, right. Which I think is mostly from the SI. It's like...
Yeah.
Yeah. I prefer it when we're learning something new together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's all I got for NE.
Oh, the other thing I was going to say, and I put that in the NE box just because that's probably not enough NE if there's like a close-mindedness. I think TI and SI is what's going to cause, that loop is what's going to cause that appearance of being close-minded. Mm-hmm. And then last thing, we kind of already talked about this, but like active online and nowhere else. I can think of an INTP that I knew, like on the weekends he would just be on Reddit and read, he had these encyclopedias and the dictionary. Some weekends it would be the encyclopedia, sometimes it would be the dictionary. Anyways, that's what he would do on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of classic. Classic unhealthy INTP, I think, to just be super active online but not actually have an active external life. It's all this internal, like on the computer.
Yeah. That does bring up, I think not experienced enough is a big thing with NE. I think healthy NE, like if you think ENFPs or ENTPs, they're doing a ton out in the world. They're exploring different things. They're sort of all over the map, I think. And INTPs maybe they're exploring a lot, but it's like researching, which is a lot different than actually, extroverted intuition is actually experiencing the outer world. So it's not just your thoughts. I think you can get a lot of times with your second function, you can get this like fake, for introverts, fake extroversion where, like for me as an ISFP, getting into SE, I can do it by like researching about baseball or something. And so I feel like I'm getting into SE, but really I'm just in my loop and I am not experiencing the world unless I'm actually playing baseball or doing something. So for INTPs, I think getting out into the world, experiencing things makes you a lot more well-rounded person. And
yeah, I've known INTPs have all sorts of interesting hobbies. I think NE gives like a really big breadth to just different hobbies. Like language learning, I notice is a big one. Like they might be in a language learning class. I knew there's one did like salsa dancing. I know a few that learn a bunch of different instruments, like musical instruments, like guitar, classical randomly, like, one likes a 12-string guitar. Your uncle has a ton of different reptiles, which is kind of interesting. He had a hyena.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so I think it's like actual legitimate things externally. Like, don't limit your NE to, Wikipedia and Reddit. Like, that doesn't really count.
Right. I think travel's huge. If you think of ENFP especially, they do a lot of travel. And I think the healthiest INTP I know has done a lot of travel. And I think that has helped, just that travel helps form your thoughts. You're getting, your mind sort of getting exposed to all these different cultures and experiences. And so then your SI can sort of process a lot of these experiences, which can feed up to your NE, like oh, these are all the possibilities. I've seen a lot of possibilities, so there's these other things that it makes me think of, and yeah, travel is huge.
Yeah, there was a quote. It was like, the biggest enemy to ignorance is travel, I think.
Lack of travel.
The enemy to ignorance
Oh,
is
okay.
travel.
I got you.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting, because one thing to read about England, let's say, but it's another thing to actually go there. There's just like a lot more nuanced understanding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you read about it, you're relying on other people's like secondhand accounts, and there's a lot more nuance when it's a firsthand account. Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's all I got for that one. Introverted sensing. What do you got?
I put nervous to share their quirkiness. So again, one of my favorite things about INTPs is how quirky they are. And it's like they've got this any that's, I think, really fun to be around. They're quirky. They've got all these interests that are really unique and special. And I think with SI, if they're in an SI loop, they're sort of nervous. Maybe it's like lack of FE, not knowing how to relate to the world, and feeling like they need to act a certain way to relate to the world. Whereas any, I think, just does, and I like that about INTPs when they just do. They're just themselves. They're bold about it. I think if they get trapped in this SI loop, they're like, I just need to sort of hold myself back a little and be normal, quote normal.
Right. Yeah, I love when INTPs dress kind of out there. Like I mentioned, I've seen like, I think anime is kind of a stereotype, or like Pokemon, all that's kind of a stereotype. But I have seen, for some reason, animation with any. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Into like Disney or anime. I don't know, stuff like that. And so I love when I see that kind of. I love when I see them wearing like some like random animation.
Yeah.
Or like Comic-Con, stuff like that. I love that sort of thing. I think it's super fun. It's a good conversation starter too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know a single thing about any of that, but you can tell me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think introverted sensing gives a sense of laziness, actually. Like if they're like depressed or something, can give this laziness. Yeah, introverted sensing is going inward and like processing things. It's just like if you're too introverted, it can kind of come off lazy. Because to be productive, you have to engage with the external world. Like it's just kind of a extroverted thing. Right. And so if you're too introverted, I can notice them, and it's not, laziness is not exclusive to INTPs, but I do notice that SI third can come off kind of lazy. It could be like maybe not enough SI, maybe just like creating bad routines, like maybe just like never moving out of the house, eating a bunch of junk food, no real plan, just creating a bunch of these kind of depressive routines.
Yeah, I think habits are key for healthy SI. Basically, your level of health with SI, I think, is in large part determined by your habits and your routines. So if you have all these unhealthy habits, you're going to be an unhealthy person. If you have all these healthy habits, you're going to be a healthy person. So watching what your SI is doing, if your SI is always, if your routines are always to eat out, always to stay inside, always to not hang out with people, then you're just going to keep going down that path, and you're not going to be happy with the result. Set up some good routines, eating healthy, interacting with the world regularly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This next thing, I'm not sure if I should put it in. Well, I'll put it in SI, but I'm not sure that necessarily should be in this box. But we kind of already touched on it. But picking a minute detail and missing the point, and that's kind of like that forest trees that you said, I guess, already. But yeah, it just comes down to that introverted loop, TI and SI, being super precise. Yeah, missing like the point of, there's like a point of the sentence, but being like getting distracted by this one word that wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that I don't know exactly how, maybe that's why they talk slower or something, maybe. But what happens, like when I'm talking, like I feel that I have a pretty big vocabulary, but but I'll just pick the first word that will communicate the gist and I just say it, even if a different synonym maybe would do it better. And so maybe I'll say something and then INTP was like, I don't know if that's quite right. I don't know if it's X, it should be Y. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, you think that creates a different meaning? X and Y, they're synonyms. I'm like, that does not communicate a different meaning, does it? And then they think it does, and so then they'll say, don't you mean this, actually? you know what happened one time was the difference between integrate and develop. I said one time that you should develop your fourth function. And this person's like, no, you shouldn't develop it. You should integrate it. And I was like, yeah, integrate. That's fine. What's the difference?
Now you're going to get a bunch of comments on the difference.
I'm like astounded sometimes at the distinction between, I don't know what it is. I think it's NI partially. It'll just be like a vibe. I know the vibe of a word. I do not know the precise definitions of words, is what I found. And so then I'll look it up, and they're like, and I'll actually, every time I go to the dictionary and I look up a word, the INTP is always correct at the technical definition. And I'm like, I don't know. I think I just know connotations and not denotations or something. I don't know. It's just not as precise.
Yeah, I think INTPs are really particular about their words. Like when they speak, they're choosing things very intentionally. They're talking at a pretty slow pace so that they can make sure their words are right on and hitting them all correctly. But I think that's great for the way they speak. I think they, speak eloquently and use really good words. I like listening to the words actually that they use. But when they're around other people, I think FE especially, like developing FE, you're not going to correct as much. If someone uses a word that's off a bit, they're going to use their FE to be like, okay, this is what they meant, and they'll just move on. I think that can be a little change that could improve your relationships quite a bit, not correcting as much. Because I don't think people, some people probably don't care, but I think some people are like, when they get corrected, their instinct is like, they don't like being corrected, and so that might cause them to not like you as much if they're constantly being corrected.
That used to bother me a lot. This is an example where, because of typology, I have more respect for a function. TI used to annoy the crap out of me before I knew that TI was a thing. Just this minute corrections. I just thought that people were being just intentionally dense. My interpretation was that they knew what I meant and just wanted to take the opportunity to find something wrong with what I said. Like, I assumed like a bad intent with it.
Yeah.
And so now I'm at a place where I'm like, I actually think they have good intent, and I actually have respect for it now. But I do think for people that don't know about typology, like just maybe being aware that that's how it comes off.
Yeah.
So some people could interpret it that way.
Yeah, and I think it's great to be very accurate about your own words and precise with
your own
language.
Words, yeah.
But for your friendships, I would say, unless they are another, like, they're a TI user and they appreciate that. Like, if they talk like that, they probably appreciate it back. But, yeah.
I think TI users do not.
Yeah, TI users maybe. Yeah, try to correct less, I think, will help your relationships.
Yeah, what was the book that you read, How to Win Friends and Influence People? I had never read that book. I just skimmed a chapter and was like, I don't like it. But there was one chapter that you really liked, and I guess you could talk about it, but it was like, never correct people was one of the principles.
Yeah. Yeah, the story was, this is sort of I think it's from an ISFJ or something. I'm not sure. But anyways, the story was like, they were out at like a dinner, so there were like 6 of them out, and this one guy was talking about like he'd went to, Berkeley University, I don't know, some college, and gotten this certain award. Or I'm just sort of making up the story because I don't remember it. But someone who's actually read the book will probably correct me. And this other person was like, oh, you didn't actually, you actually went to this other university. You're lying. So it's like this TI correction, lying. And his friend next to him like kicked him. And like later he was like, why'd you kick me? He was lying. He was totally making that up. This TI like truth thing that you're correcting. And he was like, what do you gain from correcting him? You don't gain anything. You're only tearing him down and embarrassing him in front of people. And then you're hurting your relationship with him. You're making him look bad. And so there's sort of this FE-TI dichotomy, I think, of, you're losing relationships with that correction. And so, I think TI is useful. I think if people are lying, I think they should be corrected. That was sort of like a public setting. So, I don't know.
Yeah, there are FE parameters, I think. There are some social rules, I guess, as to what the circumstances need to be. I think in a big group, that's a setting where correcting people is not.
Yeah, I think correcting people in a group will lose friendships just because people are so worried about their public image that if they're hurt, they're going to feel threatened by you and, end that relationship. Mm-hmm. So, but I think people, if you correct them more personally, I think that's a better way.
Mm-hmm. I guess I didn't remember that being such an egregious example. That was literally a lie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm not, lies are different than just synonym differentiation, you know?
Yeah.
I think one thing I heard was that it takes 7 positive things to outweigh 1 negative thing. Like, the setting I heard this in was like teaching and parenting. It was like, I think it was in teaching context. So if you like correct a student or you correct a child or something, or in the case of TI, you correct something that someone did, it takes 7 positive things, which I would say are kind of these FE, I don't know what they'd be, compliments or pointing out things well that people do to kind of outweigh that relational damage. And I think sometimes the ratio with TI DOMs is like 7 corrections to 3 compliments.
I think a lot of times their way of giving love is through correction. They're like I would want people to correct me, so they're gonna correct people, and that's like a way. I'm not even
sure if they see it as correcting people. Even I'm not sure if they. I think. No, I'm not an INTP, but I think that they just see it as like, that's not quite true. Let's get on the same page. Okay, now this is what we mean. And so I don't even think it's like a you're wrong, I'm right. I don't even think it's like a correction like that. It's like a let's get on the same page about what specifically happened.
Mm-hmm.
But to other people, it comes off like a correction, like you're a parent reprimanding.
Yeah.
Okay, random. Okay, we go to this side.
Good with SI.
Okay. Yep. Okay, FE.
I mentioned this already, but sort of the social uncertainty. So INTPs, if they haven't developed FE, they could be unsure how they come off, and lead to some of these things. I think the biggest thing, I think INTPs really healthy show themselves. They let themselves be weird. They let themselves talk before they think. I think a lot of times unhealthy INTPs always are thinking before they talk. There was a mentor of mine who I think was an ESP, but his advice to me, and I think was useful for me as an ISFP, probably not for him, but was what was it? Ready, shoot, aim, or something. So it's like this: you fire and then you aim and correct, and it's this. I think it's good for introverts especially to act and then correct as you go, because a lot of times you're already prepared. You've already thought through a lot of stuff. Don't get so caught up in this analysis paralysis or thinking through everything, and so be willing to talk before you think. I think can be a good advice tip.
Yeah, it's like this, like, okay, I'll just learn a bunch, and then once I learn a bunch, then I'll be ready. It's kind of that Enneagram 5 thing. Like, once I learn all this stuff, then I'll be ready. And you can see that show up with, like, it seems like with dating, like, INTPs, like, watching dating videos or being on Reddit asking dating questions, and it's like, really the thing that would help you, I think, is just getting more friendships and not getting into this how to date and learning how to date. Just like make friends, and then one of those friends will turn into, like, it's just an odds game. More friends you have, more options you have for someone to date.
Yes.
I think that applies to pretty much anything. Just this, get out there instead of learning about it.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of asking for dating advice from INTPs. I think that's part of the social uncertainty, but especially around like intimate relationships, it seems like how do I go about this? And yeah, I think you're totally right. Experience is going to be your best friend. So getting in relationships, even if it's not dating relationships, like just the more relationships that you have with people, the more you're going to become good at social interaction. And, that's key to an intimate relationship too, just communicating with people.
I knew one INTP, this would completely go against some stereotypes. It was actually kind of like a player, I would say, which is very... And I promise they're an INTP. Like, I'm sure of it. Then, and he had a lot of friends, and he had like a lot of work friends, and he got really good at it. He was a super good conversationalist, very open-minded, and I thought he was an example of, I don't know if being a player is really great, but an example of someone whose social skills were really developed.
Yeah.
And I think he did kind of confide that he did feel awkward in certain settings, but he did a really good job of hiding it almost. Mm-hmm. Just acting in spite of it, like being kind of like brave in doing that.
Yeah, I don't like when there's, there are stereotypes for each of the types, but like when they make you boxed into this unhealthy, I think, version of like an INTP. For example, I think INTPs often get the caricature of, in their mom's basement playing video games and bad at social interaction. Whereas I don't think that's always the case. I think INTPs are fully capable of coming into relationships really well. I think they're great at they can be really socially aware and socially adept, and I think it's worth developing, and I think it can be developed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime if people use personality as an excuse, I think I just hate that. I think people should use personality to grow and better themselves and say, hey, here's a weakness that's holding me back. What functions do I have that I could pull on in my specific top 4? Like, what can I do to pull on those things? And if people are like, yeah, well, I'm an INTP, so I'm just always going to be socially awkward, I don't know that INTPs are super prone to that, but if there are some who are, I would say maybe get more of a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I had written down, I guess you've already kind of talked about, just the schlubby looking.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew one in particular. Not all the INTPs I know are like that, but yeah, just more of that. I do think it comes from the FE, not understanding how people would perceive schlubby looking people.
Yeah, you've talked about that, I think, in the INTJ, like the maybe NISE combo of the steak versus the sizzle, or is that how you?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's like this. You can have a lot of substance, and you can have a lot of the meat as a steak. But if you don't have like the sizzle, like the show of, then people don't necessarily care about eating the steak. And so the lesson there is you can have all this knowledge, you can have all this TI, SI, wit and wisdom and insights into stuff, but if you're not showing up with your FE and your NE and using those well, you're not going to impact anyone else with that knowledge and with that wisdom that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's all I have for what's annoying about them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll talk about growth advice. I think for all the types, it's just to develop that second and fourth function. I think INTPs feel pretty awkward, and I have known some awkward INTPs, but I can think of a few that were really not awkward. And when you think about an INTP and an ENTP, ENTPs are known for being pretty charismatic, kind of slick, almost in a bad way sometimes. They can be so charismatic they can use it negatively. INTPs have all of those same functions, and then they get the stereotype of sometimes being awkward or not sure socially. And so if you just think about, you share all those functions. So if you can pull on that NE and FE, that's where you get that, I think that INTP that I know that was kind of a player, actually. He had a lot of girlfriends. I don't know if I'd call him a player. He had a lot of long-term relationships. I don't know if you call it. It's not really a player, I guess. And I know one INTP who's in his 40s that I think was really smooth and charismatic. And so when you think about 40-year-old INTPs, because I think as you get older, you just tend to integrate more of your functions in a more well-rounded way.
Yeah.
And so if you can do it when you're 40, I think you can, if you know about the functions, you can kind of intentionally try to develop it a little earlier. So I've known a lot of really smooth, not awkward INTPs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I love thinking about the health, it's actually my, I think, great uncle who's my INTP, the person I think of when I think of a really healthy INTP. He's still, I think, quirky. It's not awkward, but it's still this quirkiness that I really enjoy. But it's confident in showing up in the world. He's really good at social interactions. So it's he's developed this FE and NE. He's done a lot of traveling. He's experienced a lot of the world, and I think that's helped him too. And he does read a ton. He does a ton of research and stuff too. But he's experienced so much that I think his thoughts are really great, and his social awareness is phenomenal also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your uncle's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that that NE in particular, kind of that quirkiness, I think is really, really good at showing up in the world. I think NE is a really well-liked function. I think NE is an incredibly well-liked function out in the world. It can be very optimistic. It's got a lot of new ideas. Hey, let's try this. And I think that's the fun part about INTPs. It's hey, I'll show you this thing. Have you done this thing before? Let's try this thing. And I think that can be really fun when you get an INTP showing you new things and experiencing more of the world. I think that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Biggest growth advice, I guess, harness your SI, I think, in a useful way. So if you find yourself too introverted, I would say use SI to create some routines for hanging out with people, get some friendships where you're going out, once or twice a week with the same people. Get some routines, hygiene routines. Where you're dressing up nice or showering, or if you have those issues.
Yeah, not all INTPs have those issues, but we definitely know some that do. Yeah.
But just get some great SI habits. A great SI habit for you, I think, is traveling. So take time to, budget some time and money to get some travel world experience.
I think it's always good to get around your extroverted counterparts. So be around some ENTPs, kind of watch how they do things. And then it's also good to be around kind of your reverse. So that in this case, it'd be the ESFJ. I think it's good to get around them and really see what those two types do well that you can kind of harness and pull on to some extent. You don't have to become an ESFJ, you don't have to become an ENTP, but what are the strengths they have that you are capable of pulling on as well? I think a good thing, like it's kind of a routine thing that we've done, but we hang out with the same people. It's like every other week, like every other Monday we hang out with them. So if you can get some extroverted routines, it's a little NE and the SI.
Yeah.
One prompt we said for the ENTPs and the ENFPs, so it's a little different, but is the question, what lesson should I have learned in the last 5 years that I didn't? And how do I want to actually go about learning that lesson in the next 5 years? So I think introverted sensing is about processing the past. And so processing the past in a good way, not just romanticizing the past. Sometimes I can hear INTPs kind of like, it's strange to hear. It doesn't seem like it goes with the stereotype, but kind of romanticizing like, oh, I used to have this relationship, and talking about kind of, I don't know, kind of thinking like, oh, the past was so good, now it's not. But instead of being stuck in the past, processing it. What lesson should I have learned? And then turning that SI, turn it more NE. How do I want to go forward in the future?
Yeah, it's good advice.
Yeah. So I think that's it. So yeah, I want to reiterate that I love INTPs. And the healthy ones I know do not really exhibit a lot of these things. I think maybe probably all INTPs maybe have some of these things. At some point in their life, they had some of these things. But like the healthy ones I know don't really do any of these things anymore. So if you're a healthier INTP, maybe you don't have some of those issues. So it's not all INTPs do all of these things or anything. And I really like INTPs. Super interesting. I've learned so many interesting things from INTPs. I think I mentioned it in a previous video, but I learned the difference between agnostic and ignostic from an INTP. That was part of that religious conversation, part of that talking past each other things. That's not even in the realm of how you talk about things. But so it's super, super interesting, super great conversationalists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love their quirkiness. I love the way they show up in the world. I think is phenomenal. When they show up as themselves in a great way, like they're bold and confident in I think this fun, weird, quirky way. Yeah, and they have a lot of insight and wisdom to share with people, which I find very refreshing. That they have so much depth to them as well.
Yeah. Sweet. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.
See ya.